Ball's Pyramid. It is 1,843 feet tall. It's 50% taller than the Empire State Building, and it juts out of the Pacific Ocean. It looks like a supervillain's lair.
In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a single blade of stone rises higher than the Eiffel Tower. Remote, jagged, and surrounded by violent seas, Ball's Pyramid has long been feared as impossible to reach. Yet a few explorers dared to climb its sheer walls, determined to unlock its secrets. But halfway up, something happened that shook them to their core. Was it the rock itself, the ocean below, or something alive clinging to the cliffs? What they encountered turned a climb into a chilling story of survival. A phantom of stone. Rising from the heart of the Pacific Ocean, Ball's Pyramid looks less like part of our world than something from a dream or a nightmare. A solitary blade of basalt. It cuts upward from deep blue water like the fin of a giant creature, its jagged outline often blurred by mist. At 562 meters, or 1,840 feet, it is the tallest volcanic sea stack on Earth, a natural skyscraper taller than the Eiffel Tower. Yet its base is barely 300 meters across, so narrow that from a distance it seems two-dimensional, like the edge of a knife pressed against the horizon. The pyramid lies 643 kilometers northeast of Sydney, within Australia's Lord Howe Island Marine Park. Remote and brutal, it is surrounded by waters that plunge more than 2,000 meters deep. Unlike islands softened by reefs or sandbars, Ball's Pyramid has no gentle slopes to greet visitors. Waves born in the vast South Pacific slam directly into its sides, curling around the rock and colliding in violent bursts. Few ships dare approach closer than 30 to 50 meters, and even then, captains watch nervously as swells threaten to hurl them against the cliffs. The spire itself is the eroded remnant of a shield volcano, worn by millions of years of storms and waves until only its basalt core remained. Once a massive volcanic island, it has been whittled to this narrow spire, time itself sculpting a monument to endurance. Its cliffs are sheer, its ridges unstable, and its few ledges slick with guano and barnacles. There is no soil for roots, no beaches for shelter, only vertical walls of dark rock rising straight out of the sea. After sailing with convicted persons to Norfolk Island, Royal Navy officer Lieutenant Henry Lidgebird Ball was mightily impressed to have spotted it in 1788. He made an entry in his logbook, thereby forever linking his name to the spire. But he did not attempt to land. There was ample warning in that one site. With massive waves, sheer cliffs, and an uninviting profile, Ball's Pyramid screamed that it was a place hostile to men. Thereafter, it remained untouched for nearly a century, recorded but never touched by human feet. What most sailors said about it, plus those deepened her mystery. They talked about waves whose height allowed sprays to reach the level of their decks, saturating sails and seamen even farther, hundreds of meters away. They would say that seabirds nest in numbers that call reverberated across the sea, a vengeful chorus trailing the ships long after losing sight of land. Eerie lights in stormy weather were mentioned by some, reflections in the surge that made the spire glow eerie in that darkness. With no one able to attempt a landing or come forward to deny the stories, this became Ball's Pyramid's only knowledge in the outside world. Ball's Pyramid, invisible to many people, was as much an island. Looming above the horizon for a short time, it disappeared into the clouds and rain. A beacon to sailors attempting to brave the Pacific, it was as much a warning as a wonder, a testament, available on cartographers' sheets to nature's scale and indifference. No beaches, no forests, and no safe harbors around it. Only the ink silhouette of stone rising from the abyss. The 19th century explorers found that emptiness was at once terrifying and tantalizing. What was on that spire? Who could even set foot on it? Was it possible to climb? Before a single person dragged a foot on its slopes, Ball's Pyramid had already been a challenge. That puzzle of stone thrust above the waves, and as the years passed, curiosity only grew, setting the stage for those who would risk everything to uncover its secrets. The first attempts, For decades after Lieutenant Henry Lidgebird Ball first sighted the pyramid in 1788, the spire was left alone. Its sheer walls and violent seas repelled even the boldest seafarers. Sailors pointed to it in awe, but never dared approach. A jagged mark on the map that seemed beyond reach. That began to change in the late 19th century when curiosity finally overcame fear. In February 1882, Henry Charles Wilkinson, a geologist with the New South Wales Department of Mines, decided to test the legends. Aboard the survey vessel Comet, he drew closer than anyone before. The ship crept within 60 meters of the rock, its basalt wall towering above as waves pounded the cliff face. 4 men lowered themselves into a dinghy, timing their strokes between 3-meter swells. As they neared the cliffs, the rock looked impossibly slick, glazed with spray and barnacles. With a desperate leap, they scrambled onto a narrow ledge, dragging the dinghy clear before the ocean could smash it. In that moment, they became the first recorded men to set foot on Ball's pyramid. But triumph was brief. Within 2 hours, the weather turned. Northeasterly winds whipped waves higher until retreat was the only option. They clambered back into the dinghy and rowed frantically into open water, barely escaping the spire's grip. Even so, Wilkinson's mission was not a failure. He collected rock samples that revealed the pyramid was no ordinary sea stack, but the eroded core of a massive shield volcano, weathered over millions of years until only its spine remained. That discovery transformed it from a curiosity into a geological marvel, planting a seed in the minds of future explorers and climbers. The dangers, however, were undeniable. The base offered no footing beyond barnacle-crusted ledges, forcing anyone who tried to land to leap from boats into surf that could slay with a single misstep. Climbers would have to seize slick holds while the ocean tore at them, with no margin for error. Crashing waves, razor rock, and relentless wind made approaching the pyramid an expedition in itself. For almost 8 decades after the short visit of Wilkinson, Ball's pyramid guarded its secrets from all. Passing ships speak of its haunting sights and sounds, the roar of waves, rolling like thunder through caves, seabirds wheeling endlessly above, and nights alive with lightning illuminating its outline, burnt like a spear against the sky. Adventurers fantasized about standing atop it, though very few got beyond mapping out the plan for their adventure. In 1936, members of the Sydney University Climbing Club announced their intention to climb the spire. However, nature did not budge. The weather turned sour, the seas became unpassable, and the expedition never even reached the rock. The pyramid was left unclimbed. Almost 2 decades later, the officers of the Royal Australian Navy were sent to do an aerial survey over the spire in 1959 to mark a possible route. The report that came back was rather discouraging. The cliffs were too sheer, ridges too broken, seas too violent, making ascent impractical, according to the Navy. The pronouncement only fueled interest rather than snuffing it out. When the first photos appeared on a page in the newspapers, public excitement soared. The pyramid, it would seem, was all the less within reach to would-be climbers. It was during the early years of the 1960s when quite a number of changes made their way into rock climbing. New gear, advanced techniques, and a whole new generation of climbers, really eager for some first ascents, turning what previously seemed to be a death trap into a pretty big challenge. The failures of the past were more invitations than deterrents. The initial real attempts brought about hardship and disappointment, but they were not insignificant. They were turning points. Ball's pyramid was no longer a phantom spire revealed to distant view. It was an inverted mountain awaiting conquest. And soon, the first serious expeditions would arrive, determined to go higher than anyone before, no matter the cost. The 1960s breakthroughs. By the 1960s, Ball's pyramid had shifted in the minds of explorers from an untouchable spire to a challenge waiting to be solved. Advances in climbing techniques and stronger gear emboldened mountaineers to attempt routes once deemed too dangerous. Against this backdrop, the pyramid stood as the ultimate prize, a natural skyscraper rising from the ocean, daring men to defy its reputation. The first serious attempt came in 1964. Dick Smith, an ambitious young adventurer who would later become famous as a pioneer in communications and aviation, led a small expedition from Sydney. Their plan was simple: land on the pyramid, establish a base, and push for the summit. Landing was the first trial. Battling heavy surf, the climbers scrambled onto a precarious ledge and hauled up their equipment. But from the start, the rock betrayed them. The basalt was loose and crumbly, anchors ripped free, and progress slowed to a crawl. Each climber carried heavy ropes and iron gear, much of it unreliable against the brittle stone. Nights were worse. They sheltered in damp sea caves where waves surged dangerously close at high tide. Sleep was broken, with someone always awake to watch the sea. Large centipedes crawled across their packs and ropes, as if the rock itself rejected their presence. After days of struggle, Smith's team had climbed only a few hundred meters before retreating. The decision was bitter, but their effort proved something crucial. The pyramid was not impossible. Word spread quickly, and their near success ignited interest across Australia. If Smith's team could climb so high, what could a better prepared expedition achieve? The answer came swiftly. In 1965, a new team of Australians returned under the leadership of Bryden Allen, a seasoned mountaineer known for precision and resilience. Alongside him were Jack Pettigrew, John Davis, and Dave Witham, supported by 2 New Zealanders handling logistics. Unlike earlier attempts, this expedition was meticulously planned. The group Allen was training especially for sea landings, learning how to jump from boats into crashing surf and scale wet rock before being drawn back by the waves. They studied pictures and maps to choose their route, the most daunting, in fact, the Southwest Ridge. They carried a lot of stuff: over 600 meters of rope, car batteries to power a ship-to-shore radio, and meticulously chosen climbing hardware. It was not just an adventure, it was a mission. In February 1965, they found themselves at the foot of the hill. The seas were still somewhat restless after a recent cyclone, but they timed their landings to coincide with the waves and continued. They set up camp in a cramped sea cave 100 meters above the ocean and began their ascent to the surface. The climb was terrific on high. It required fixing and resetting ropes all the time. The higher they went up, the narrower and more shaky the ridge became. At 400 meters, it was overhung heavily and forced them to depend on equipment and not natural holds. Every movement was extremely careful. A mistake could have fatal consequences. After a couple of days, Allen and Witham reached their destination on February 14, 1965, Valentine's Day, soon followed by Davis and Pettigrew. Together, they stared at Ball's Pyramid, the peak no one else had conquered. Surprisingly flat, but measuring 30 meters, the summit offered the most beautiful view of the Pacific, with a diffused Lord Howe Island at a distance. They made a small pile of rocks, left a note, and celebrated with champagne. The victory, however, was shadowed by reality. The descent was just as treacherous. They spent the night exposed on a ledge before making their way down. The climb of 1965 proved the impossibility of Ball's Pyramid. As it turned out, it was conquerable by skill and preparation. It was also a barometer of the ruthless jaggedness of the spire, a loose rock, a terrific sea, and a mischievous ridge, which made every ascent an extremely risky business. For most of them, the glory was outweighed by the dangers. Yet, the breakthroughs of the 1960s changed everything. Ball's Pyramid was no longer a phantom spire, it was a conquered peak, a place where human determination had matched the raw power of nature. But its story was far from over. New routes, bolder attempts, and unexpected discoveries would soon reveal that the pyramid still had many secrets left to share, new routes, and growing obsession. The 1965 ascent of Ball's Pyramid was a milestone, but also a spark. Once climbers proved the summit possible, the question shifted. No longer if it could be done, but how many ways it could be achieved. For some, one successful route was enough. For others, the pyramid became an obsession, a jagged monument, daring them to find new paths up its impossible walls. The first to answer that challenge was Keith Bell, an Australian climber known for tackling dangerous, unexplored terrain. In 1970, he teamed up with John Worrell to attempt a bold new line, the West Ridge. From the sea, this skyline looked nearly unclimbable, its thin spires shaped by centuries of wind and rain. Where the Southwest Ridge had at least precedent, the West Ridge was pure unknown. Before sunrise, Bell and Worrall hauled their gear onto the slick base and began the ascent. Almost immediately, they faced the ridge's razor-thin towers, the sister gendarmes. These narrow spires crumbled at the touch, like giant blades of brittle stone. Progress was agonizingly slow. They fought loose rock, aggressive seabirds, and rain that turned basalt into glass. Nights brought little rest. Their campsite was a ledge barely wide enough for a surfboard, where they strapped themselves in and tried to sleep. After 2 grueling days, they reached the summit. Against the odds, they had completed the first ascent of the West Ridge, proving even the most intimidating skyline could be conquered. Their climb expanded the pyramid's mythology, transforming it from a singular achievement into a canvas of possibilities for future expeditions. The obsession deepened. By the late 1970s, climbers across Australia spoke of Ball's Pyramid with reverence, calling it the most dangerous test piece in the Southern Hemisphere. Many dreamed of standing on its summit. Few dared to try. In 1979, Dick Smith, radio pioneer and head of the 1964 expedition, was back on the mountain of his earliest dreams. 14 years later, alongside John Worrell and Hugh Ward, he returned to find the seas unusually calm and the fishing boat, Lissa Jane, easily slipping beneath the cliffs. The trio moved fast, finding some very faded ropes left from 1965. They rethreaded them with a new line and went upwards, traversing brittle sections where earlier climbers had failed. Within 48 hours, Smith's team stood on the summit. However, this expedition had quite the burden apart from the usual bottle of champagne. Also emerging from their packs was a blue flag with a Southern Cross. This had been a gift from the Prime Minister of New South Wales, Neville Wran. The team planted it firmly into the basalt, thus formally staking Australia's claim. It was a token gesture, but one that emphasized how much the pyramid had become a symbol for climbers and for the nation. By the very early 1980s, Ball's Pyramid had changed from an enigmatic sea stack to an accepted standard of human endurance. Yet, its extreme sensitivity was becoming known too. The basaltic structure was unstable, and under the weight of a climber, it could just crumble. The sea was treacherous with no intervening obstructions of reef or sandbar to attenuate the swells. And most forbiddingly, consequences beset a rapid-fire rescue near impossibility. Helicopters were blown away from the course by violent gusts. Against the rocky cliffs, boats could be pounded a bit harder. Should a climber sustain an injury, there was no safe extraction option. But it's hardly the danger that would keep fueling this obsession. For the few that dare, Ball's Pyramid had become more than a climb. It was a proving ground. Skill, preparation, and nerve were taken to their limit. With every ascent, yet another story was carved into its legend, bringing with it more eyes to its jagged blade of stone, rising from the Pacific. Yet, even if climbers slashed maps of ridges and routes, scientists were getting ready to go for their stake. For them, the obsession was not in conquest, but preservation. And in the mid-1980s, the battle over Ball's Pyramid would shift from climbers to conservationists, changing its story forever. Bans, secrets, and the unexpected. By the mid-1980s, Ball's Pyramid was more than a climber's obsession. It had also become a growing concern for scientists and policymakers who recognized both its dangers and its fragility. The same sheer basalt that drew adventurers made every ascent perilous. Crumbling rock, violent seas, and the impossibility of rescue turned each attempt into a gamble. Yet, ecologists were beginning to see its isolation as something else, a rare refuge for life found nowhere else on Earth. In 1986, the New South Wales government made a controversial decision. Recreational climbing on Ball's Pyramid was banned. Safety was part of the reason, but not the only one. The basalt walls, scoured by storms and salt, were more delicate than they appeared. Climbing risked accelerating erosion and damaging the ledges where seabirds nested. The ban marked a turning point. For decades, the spire had been a target for conquest. Now it became something to protect. Yet the ban only deepened the pyramid's mystique. It became a forbidden peak, approachable only by scientists with special permits. And for the few who did, it revealed secrets no one had expected. In 2001, a small team of researchers arrived with a specific mission: to search for signs of the Lord Howe Island stick insect, which had long been thought extinct. Known locally as the tree lobster for its armored body and size, the insect once thrived on Lord Howe Island. But in the 1920s, invasive rats brought by ships wiped them out. For nearly 80 years, the species was remembered only through museum specimens. Still, strange reports lingered. Climbers in the 1960s had described finding insect droppings on Ball's Pyramid, droppings far too large for any known species there. The hints were tantalizing, but unproven. Now, armed with climbing expertise and official permits, scientists set out to investigate. 100 meters straight above the sea, a discovery awaited them, more than they could ever dream of. A thickly bush-vegetated patch of basalt fissure dwelling sites yielded living stick insects, a rare find of not one, but 24, almost 15 centimeters in length, shiny, dark, and different from any other soul on Earth. The stick insect was a scream for its extinction. Against all odds, the Lord Howe Island stick insect had been alive and undiscovered for generations upon generations on Ball's Pyramid. Such a find was an upheaval for science. Not only had the species survived, but it thrived in one of the harshest places conceivable. The pyramid was reframed once again. It was not only an odd-looking thing of a rock, but the place where mouthing climbers battled its steep faces. It was a refuge, a final home for those creatures the world had forgotten. From this moment onwards, the conservationists did their utmost to protect the fragile numbers. Some were taken into captivity for a breeding program with hopes of sending them back to Lord Howe Island. The tree lobster has thus come to symbolize resilience and nature's tenacity in surviving against impossible odds. The discovery was a bittersweet event for climbers. The ban continued, and each year the ridges became quieter. As for scientists and conservationists, however, the pyramid became even more valuable, not as a peak to summit, but as a living laboratory for proof of how isolation can nurture miracles. The end of this ban kept climbers away from the mystery that had made Ball's Pyramid legendary. Instead of a coronation view, it had simply been a story of their life seeped into the layers of the mountain, hidden in plain sight, expecting rediscovery. And that secret would forever change the way the world saw the jagged spire in the Pacific. Ball's Pyramid as a living monument. By the 21st century, Ball's Pyramid had shifted from a climber's obsession to something more profound. A living monument. No longer just a brutal test of endurance, it came to be seen as a natural cathedral where geology and biology intertwine in rare and fragile ways. Its isolation, once a barrier, became its strength, allowing life to persist in forms found almost nowhere else. The Lord Howe Island stick insect, rediscovered in 2001, was the most sensational proof of survival, but it was far from the only sign of life. Seabirds had long claimed the ridges, nesting on narrow ledges and filling the skies with movement and sound. Providence petrels circled overhead, their eerie cries carrying across the ocean. Masked boobies clung to the cliffs and plunged into the waters for fish. Their calls echoed off basalt walls, creating a soundscape at once haunting and beautiful. For generations, these birds had relied on the pyramid as a sanctuary in the open sea. Plants, too, adapted to the impossible. Melaleuca hawaiiana, a hardy shrub unique to the Lord Howe region, grew from fissures in the basalt, its wiry roots gripping where no soil should exist. Other plants, battered by salt spray and gales, clung to life, splashes of green against gray stone. Each testified to nature's persistence in places where survival seems unthinkable. Today, scientists treat Ball's Pyramid as a natural laboratory. Unlike the climbers of the 1960s and 1970s, who relied on brute strength and luck, researchers often study it from a distance. Drones and long-range cameras document changes in bird populations and vegetation, reducing human impact. When landings occur, they are rare, tightly controlled by permits, and undertaken with deep awareness of how fragile the ecosystem remains. In fact, it is not only the living organisms that make Ball's Pyramid extraordinary, but also that it presents a riddle. It is antagonistic waves colliding at the base of the island, storms scouring its ridges, and basalt itself under pressure. But it is also nurturing, shielding those species that have no habitat and preserving lineages from vanishing. That duality gives the pyramid the aura of being carved by nature itself in memory. To the people of Lord Howe Island, the pyramid represents pride, but it also holds mystery. Then, on days when the skies are clear, this jigsaw target looms ominously on the horizon, reminding people of both danger and wonder. Tales of unsuccessful attempts to reach the top and miraculous near-death escapes mingle with the accounts of miraculous discoveries, rendering it almost mythic. People who catch a glimpse of it from passing boats always describe it to each other as otherworldly, almost as if plucked from an epic tale. To remain in silence, the pyramid speaks. It tells the climbers to stay away. It echoes the secrets of survival to the scientists. To the world, it stands as proof that endurance can outlive ambition. One might call these rare places that offer simultaneous grotesque destructiveness alongside delicate beauty, and even much rarer ones that have not been subjected to despoilment by man. Thus, Ball's Pyramid is not merely another geological peculiarity or climbing tale. It is indeed a living monument. Each and every seabird that nests upon its rocky ledges, every insect that takes refuge within its shrubs, every crash of a wave on its boundary service in the spirit of an ancient and ongoing legacy. For those who dare to dream of it, the sight of that razor-thin spire rising from the Pacific is unforgettable. It is a reminder that some places are not meant to be conquered. They are meant to be respected. Fear, wonder, and the last refuge. Ball's Pyramid has long stirred a strange mixture of emotions. For sailors of the 18th and 19th centuries, it was a warning, a blade of stone jutting from the sea, battered by waves and echoing with seabirds. To climbers of the 20th century, it was a prize, a near-impossible challenge of courage and endurance. Today, in the 21st century, it has become something deeper, a last refuge where life clings on against the odds and where fear and wonder are inseparable. The fear comes first, rising 562 meters straight out of the Pacific. Ball's Pyramid overwhelms all who see it. Its sides are too steep for easy landings, its base pounded by swells that can sink small boats within minutes. For climbers, every handhold was a gamble, every night on a ledge a brush with death. Even helicopters avoid it. Violent gusts swirl around the rock, forcing pilots back. Its danger is inescapable. That is why, despite centuries of fascination, only a few people have ever stood on its summit. Yet fear is matched by wonder. The same qualities that make the pyramid forbidding also make it breathtaking. From afar, it looks impossible. A knife-edge blade rising from the horizon. Up close, it is a cathedral of stone, carved by millions of years of erosion, scarred by waves and storms. At sunset, its silhouette burns black against gold. At night, it disappears into darkness, marked only by surf and seabirds wheeling overhead. And within that wonder lies its greatest secret: survival. In 2001, scientists rediscovered the Lord Howe stick insect on the pyramid, transforming it from a climber's dream to a conservationist's treasure. That such a large insect could endure for nearly a century on a barren basalt spire was miraculous. It proved that nature is both resilient and mysterious, keeping secrets in places thought barren. Once referred to as tree lobsters by the locals, the species now evokes ideas of hope. Profoundly captive breeding has been this species' ticket to a second chance in life, and dreams of returning one day to Lord Howe Island. More than just the survival of these insects, their very survival brought about a whole change of mind toward the pyramid by the people. It transcended just being a barrier or a trophy. It became a sanctuary, bargaining proof that life can thrive where man perceives naught but emptiness. To the people of the island, Ball's Pyramid is both legendary and guardian. Ball's Pyramid is another silhouette on the horizon that symbolizes their bond with the sea and its mysteries. To scientists, it is a natural laboratory for experiments conducted in extreme isolation on how ecosystems survive. To the world, it is a mark of humility. Even in an age of the topographic map of mountains and the proud sail across oceans, Ball's Pyramid resists conquest. It demands submission, not subjugation. A fitting summation, perhaps. Fear and wonder are not opposites, but partners. The same rock that terrifies sailors and intimidates climbers is also home to a species once thought to be extinct. Danger is matched by beauty. Isolation, both harsh and protective. Some places will never be brought under the sway of civilization, serving instead as testaments to survival, to mystery, to the limits of human ambition. Ball's Pyramid remains one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Part wonder, part warning. What do you think the explorers truly felt halfway up that jagged spire? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss what's coming next. Watch the video appearing on your screen now. You won't want to miss the secrets waiting there.